Hello, everybody. I'm Taslima, faculty member of Pachala South Asian Media Institute. We have launched an online class on investigative journalism and many other series of topic on journalism and photography under KS. I want to give special thanks to Annalise and Makoto,
Makoto.
who are here with us. Okay. I have taken the investigative journalism course, and today we are going to finish our course, and I think we can have some exchange about this course. I have taken 5 classes, and today is the last class. So I think you can introduce yourself, then we can start some discussion that what I have taken, and maybe some question that student they have in their mind. Maybe we can share those things, and we want to get some views from your expertise. Yeah, thank you. If you introduce yourself and say something.
My name is Makoto Watanabe. So I'm an editor-in-chief of Tokyo Investigative Newsroom Tansen. So I had worked at Asahi Shimbun, national newspaper in Japan, for 16 years. And I quit the Asahi Shimbun because Japanese national paper don't fight against the power by investigative report. So I launched a newsroom, Tansa, Investigative Newsroom Tansa, in 2017. So we have now about 10 members, including volunteer, and we have 4 board members, and one of board member is analyst. Please.
Hi, I'm Annalise. I'm a reporter and, as Makoto said, a board member at Tansa. I'm originally from the United States, but I've lived in Japan for the last 5 years. Yeah, so it's really wonderful to be speaking with you today. So I'd love to hear your questions.
Yeah, nice to meet you both. Actually, when we started the class on investigative journalism, that time we divided 5 class with very common and basic ideas like definition, characteristics, the process of investigative journalism, what are the threats of the investigative journalism, and a basic idea of the history of the investigative journalism. But I think I also want to learn and share our experience with you that we started when we started the course. We give emphasis on the significance and importance of investigative journalism, because undoubtedly the importance of investigative journalism is huge in current local and global politics. So I'm interested to know, when you discuss on this topic, how you share with students about the importance of investigative journalism.
Okay. まずその探査報道がなぜ重要かというのを、説明するときに、一番大切なポイントは、権力というのは必ず自分たちにとって不都合な真実を隠す、そういう性質を持っているということです。だから探査報道でそうした不都合な真実を暴く、リビールすることが非常に重要だと。これがまず、基本です。
So first of all, when we speak about investigative journalism, the most important point is that powerful individuals or powerful institutions, such as governments or corporations, hide information that is inconvenient to them, or information that they don't want to become public. So it's the job of investigative journalists to find and then report on this hidden information so that the public can have a better understanding of what's going on in their communities and in their country.
で、その不都合な真実を隠す権力というのは2種類あります。
Okay. So there are two kinds of power that hides information.
一つは、例えばヒトラーとか、キム・ジョンウンとか、そういう独裁者と言われる、人たちです。
So one kind is the sort of very obvious quote unquote bad guy, like for example, a dictator of a country or like Hitler, for example.
で、こういう、じゃあ、そういう独裁者がいる国だけ、探査報道をやればいいかと言ったら、そうではありません。なぜならもう一つの、種類の権力があるからです。
But it's not the case that only these kind of countries need investigative journalism.
例えば、日本がそうです。で、独裁者とか言われるような人は日本にはいません。だけども、そのシステム自体、一つの、例えば、官僚機構であったりとか、大企業であったりとか、大きな組織になったときに、その組織、とか、その権力機構のシステム自体が、真実を隠そうとする場合が、よくあります。
But that's not really the situation in a country like Japan. In Japan, we don't have any obvious bad guys that are clear targets to investigate, but instead we have systems of power such as government institutions or big corporations. And these powerful systems and institutions also hide information that they don't want to be revealed.
一番わかりやすい例が、日本の第一次世界大戦の時の日本です。で、結局、アジアを、侵略したり、また、アメリカにすごい、ひどい巻き方をしたり、で犠牲者をいっぱい出しました。で、この戦争の責任っていうのが、じゃあ誰にあるのかっていう時に、天皇なのか、首相なのか、軍のトップなのか。日本ではそれとても曖昧です。その政府と軍一体となったシステム自体が一つの権力となっていたからです。
So one example from history might be Japan during World War II. So obviously, as we all know, during World War II, Japan created lots of victims, not only in the countries that it attacked, but also among the Japanese people when Japan eventually lost the war. Or towards the end of the war. But in Japan, in the world, it's still sort of up for debate over who, if there's one specific person who's responsible for Japan's actions during World War II. For example, is it the emperor at the time, or is it the head of the army at the time? But in fact, it's not just one person, it's the whole system that enabled these things to happen.
なので、世界中のあらゆる国々で探査報道というのは必要。とにかく権力は隠す。この性質を、徹底的に、覚えておかなければいけません。
So this is why investigative journalism is important around the world in any country, no matter what its political system may be, because power always hides information that it wants to keep secret. So it's up to investigative journalists to find that information and reveal it in the public interest.
I think in our country still we are struggling for making investigative report, investigative story and essays, because it's not so easy. All of our experience, I think, to some extent, same that when a journalist has own interest, maybe that can push him or her to work on specific issues. So a few days ago in our country, one journalist named Rosina, she's from a very renowned national daily, and she was arrested because she got some information from health ministry, and as far we know, she wrote some article and report before her arrest. So it was so difficult. He was also arrested because of his work. So journalists may be working in a national daily, or maybe a journalist who is a photojournalist, they are also interested sometimes. We'll talk about another thing that Makoto, you were saying that investigative journal, when we talk about investigative journalism, we try to dig something that is hidden, or sometimes people investigative journalism, usually we think about some hidden, something that is related with corruption, crime, like is born or in excitement of political situation. But I think, but we have another views also that investigative journalism is not only hidden issue, crime, corruption, maybe a citizens' rights or an environment issue can be a issue of journalism. So how you can explain these things with students about this, that not only crime, corruption, maybe the basic rights is violating, then how we can raise this basic rights or citizen rights or issue related with other things. Yeah.
とにかくそこは重要なポイントで、単に法律に違反している犯罪であるということだけであれば、それは捜査機関、警察とか捜査機関が、捜査すればいい。だけども、ジャーナリストは犯罪だけじゃなくて、そこに、権力によって苦しめられている人、で、そこに不正義、不公正、インジャスティスがあれば、我々は取材の対象として、で、それを改善するためには何をしたらいいのか。で、なぜそういった状況に置かれているのか。そういう場合、必ず、権力による、圧力であるとか、不正っていうのが隠れている場合。だから、広く環境とか人権とか、すべてのテーマを扱う必要があると。だ我々が警察と違うのはそこだ。単に犯罪を捜査するだけじゃないんだ。
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that you raise. And as investigative journalists, of course, the subjects of our investigations cover much more than just crimes or corruption. For example, if our work only covered crimes, then it wouldn't really differ so much from what the police or public prosecutors do in their work, because they are looking for specifically actions that are already illegal. But in fact, in our societies, there are many things that are not illegal per se, but are still victimizing people. So it's the job of investigative journalists to look at the world around them and then find where powerful institutions find where systems of power are creating injustice or victimizing weaker individuals. And then as journalists, we can investigate what the causes of these situations are, and maybe also what potential solutions might be. And often in these situations, there is pressure from the powerful or hidden information that the powerful wants to keep secret. So I think that's a very important role for investigative journalists.
Actually, in our environment, when we talk about investigative journalists, usually we talked about the reporter, especially the reporter. We don't think that the photojournalists, they also investigative journalists, they could be an investigative journalist. When we share about the history of investigative journalists. Usually, journalists, they are also interested to focus on journalists who wrote articles or wrote report. But I think the TV journalists and photojournalists, they are also investigative journalists. They can work on any issue that would be investigative journalism. So how you can share these things, or how do you think about this?
探査報道では本当、フォトジャーナリストってすごく重要で、なんで重要かというと、まず一つは、そういう犠牲者とか、そういう場面を生々しく、伝えられるっていうのと、それともう一つは、証拠能力が非常に高い。だから、例えば悪いことをしている場面、そういう汚職、例えば汚職にしても、企業と政治家が密会していて、そこでお金を渡す場面とか、例えば、といった証拠能力が非常に写真で収めると高いと。だからとても重要です。ただし、今後は、探査報道では、フォトジャーナリズムと探査報道と分けるんじゃなくて、つまりフォトジャーナリストとペンの記者と分けるんじゃなくて、探査報道のジャーナリストであれば、写真も撮れなくちゃいけないし、文章も書けなくちゃいけないし、一人で全てが両方できるようにならないと、これからの時代は、やっていけないだろうと思います。
Yeah, so we agree that photojournalism is really important within investigative journalism. And as I'm sure you're all aware of, photos are a really good way to show, I guess, a clearer picture of the situation where people might be victimized by the powerful. And so it's a really strong way to connect with audiences visually. And not only are photos an excellent tool for showing, I guess, the victims of the powerful, but it's also, of course, really strong proof for wrongdoing. Like, for example, just a hypothetical situation. For example, if you have a photo of like an act of bribery occurring, then obviously that photo will support your investigation a lot. And we also think that going forward in the future of journalism and investigative journalism, more and more reporters will be asked to be able to both write articles and to take photos and video. So there's probably going to be less and less divide between photojournalists and, I guess, journalists who focus on writing articles. Increasingly, we'll have to be able to do both. Yeah, that's the end of our answer.
I think through investigative journalism, journalists can raise questions, reviews, new information in the conventional thinking of citizens, and it's directly related with the with people's interests, and it's also related with the public rights of information and freedom of expression. So how we can discuss about the responsibility of state or the public rights of information in the context of investigative journalism?
はい。政府や企業、権力側がちゃんと説明責任を果たすということはとても重要なことで、市民がどんどん求めていかなくちゃいけないし、ジャーナリズムの側もそれを要求しない。ただ、探査報道のジャーナリストにとっては、それは期待してはいけません。最初に申し上げたように、権力は隠すものです。ちゃんと説明しなさいって言って、その通り説明するぐらい素直な権力であれば、我々は必要ないし、で、そんなに権力は甘いものではないという認識のもと、探査報道のジャーナリストはそういう認識を持たなくて。ただ社会的に説明責任を求めていくというのは当然重要なことです。
So, of course, we agree that it's really important that both journalists and, of course, average citizens or everyone, all members of society, demand that the state is accountable and gives all citizens the right to information. But of course, as journalists, we need to do more than simply, I guess, saying or demanding that we have this right to information or saying that we demand accountability. As journalists, it's our job to find proof of this information because it's not a guarantee that the state will hold itself accountable. It's our job as journalists and as citizens to, I guess, make sure that the state is held accountable. Yeah, that's our answer.
Journalists from different corner of the world use different process or different methods for their investigative journalism. Maybe we will get some common similarities, but every journalist has their own way. So, but we have to follow some process when we go through our investigative journalism. We have to choose a particular topic. We need to find a hypothesis. We need to do some research, do some interview, and many other things. We need to find the sources. We need to make a relation with sources. And finally, with all process, we need to publish our report or something. So within many process or methods, which basic methods you think is important for this journalism?
普通にどのジャーナリストも、取材して、記事なり映像を出すというのは共通したプロセスがあると。仮説を立てるとか、下調べをするとか、裏を取るとか、それは重要です。で、だけど探査報道にとって特別に他のものとは違って特別に必要な手続きっていうの、手続きプロセスは、ディフェンスだと。で、それは、二つあります。一つは、自分たちのストーリーを守ること。だから自分たちが批判する相手の立場に立って自分たちのストーリーを検証すること。このストーリーに対して、例えば政府だったらこういうように文句をつけるとか、こういうところで、名誉毀損だと言って裁判に訴えるとか、という相手の立場になって、それでもこのストーリーは相手に勝てると思って初めて出すべきだ。という意味のディフェンス。自分たちのストーリーを守るディフェンス。で、もう一つは情報源を守るディフェンス。これは内部告発者であるとか、よく言うディープスロートね。昔のウォーターゲート事件みたいな。で、この情報源を、絶対に守り通さなくちゃいけない。なので、取材中もそうだけども、そのストーリーを出した相手の攻撃を予想して、その情報源が、攻撃にさらされないように、バレないように、いろんな準備をした上で、ストーリーを出さなくちゃいけない。だから二つのディフェンス。ストーリーを守る。情報源を守る。これが探査報道にとって特に必要な手続き、プロセス。
Okay, so we, first of all, of course, we agree that there are lots of common processes in all forms of journalism, such as developing a hypothesis and doing your research, contacting sources, etc. But then in investigative journalism, there are some specific processes that you need to pay really close attention to when you're developing your story. And they're both related to protecting yourself and protecting the people connected to your story. So the first one is to make sure that the story you're telling, whether it's in like an article or a video format, to make sure the story has no holes, no parts of the story or gaps in the story where someone, especially the subject of your investigation, might be able to criticize you or attack you for what you've written. Like, for example, making sure nothing you've written in the story would put you in danger of having, for example, like a libel lawsuit brought against you, making sure that you can't be criticized for conflict of interest, for example. And then, as I mentioned, the second thing you need to work really hard to protect is to protect your sources. Especially in investigative journalism, some of them may be whistleblowers who are giving you information from within their own organization, and they could be in danger if it was revealed that they were the one who has been talking to you, the journalist. So you need to think about how you're going to protect your sources, both while you're doing the reporting and after your article or your video, your photos are released. So in both of these situations, it's really important to imagine what the subject of reporting, what people outside your organization could be thinking in an attempt to discredit you or attack you or to find out who your sources are. So it's very important to look at the story from different perspectives and look at your own work from various perspectives to make sure that both you and your organization and your sources are all protected. Yeah, that's our answer.
I think for journalists or people from any profession, when we decide that yes, we are going to do something on this topic, and selecting a topic for doing something is not so easy. Sometimes it's, I think, difficult. Sometimes as a journalist, maybe I am sure that yes, I'm going to do on this topic. Sometimes for journalists are confused. But I think that it is sometimes the political circumstances, our surroundings, many things influences us to select the topic. But maybe we don't have our personal inclination or connection with the topic or interest. Sometimes the other things influence us. But I think it is very important to think about the process of selection, the topic. So what are the consideration of selecting a topic, you think?
まず、公共性があること。単に秘密を暴露するのは探査報道ではなくて、ちゃんとパブリックインタレストがあるっていうことね。だから、芸能人のスキャンダルとか、そういうものを探査報道とは言いませんし、そんなのをテーマに設定するのはまた違う仕事です。で、あともう一つは、結局、その探査報道をすることによって何を変えたいかっていうのを最初にはっきりさせることですよね。誰のために何を変えたいのか。この二つ。これを、しっかりとクリアにすること。これがテーマ設定にとって大事。誰のために何を変えたいのか。
So when, as investigative journalists, when we are choosing a topic for what to investigate, what to report on, there are two important points to think about. The first is whether your topic is in the public interest, whether it's for the good of society. Investigative journalism isn't just revealing any kind of secret. Like that could, for example, include like celebrity scandals, for example. But investigative journalism is something for the public good. Then the second point is when you're selecting a topic, it's important to think about what kind of change do you want to see in the world around you and who you're doing the reporting for. So hopefully thanks to your reporting and hidden information coming to light, that people will be able to change a bad situation in their community or in society. So you should always have a really clear image of who will benefit from the reporting you're doing. Yeah, that's our answer.
If you ask me about the history of investigative journalism, I will say yes, it is very important for me. I always think history helped us a lot because when I feel lost, that time when I go back to history, I feel that history gives me a direction. So from history, we find that investigative journalism plays a great role in changing the society, changing the laws, and many things. It has a great impact on society and state, and also on journalists. So how you explain these things?
歴史。探査報道の歴史を、どうやって説明するか。一番大事なのは、探査報道の可能性を、しっかりと生徒たちに伝えることだと思います。なので、この探査報道によって、例えば、ニューヨークタイムズのペンタゴンペーパーによって、ベトナム戦争は早く終わったんだとか、日本でもいろいろな探査報道の歴史があって、法律が変わったりとか。で、例えば一例を挙げるなら、僕の先輩ですけど、朝日新聞で、精神病院に潜入して、患者のふりをして入院して、で、その精神病院の中っていうのは、もう虐待だらけ。で、縛ったり殴ったり。で、そういう状況を、潜入、患者として仮病で、潜入して、それで、ルポしたね。で、それが衝撃的で、法律が変わりました。精神病院に対して。というように、いかに探査報道が、可能性があるかっていうのをしっかり伝える。で、その際に大事なのは、ちゃんと具体的に伝える。取材をした記者、どんな人で、どういう経緯でその取材を始めて、で、取材した相手はどういうふうに対処したのかっていう、さっき言ってたプロセスを具体的にで、説明すること、ケーススタディとしてっていうのが非常に大事。で、それを君たちにもできるんだっていうことをちゃんと伝える。単に一部のスターだけが偶然できたんじゃなくて、ジャーナリストが本当に真剣に仕事をすればできるんだと。で、一緒にやろうとこういうことを、っていうことをちゃんと情熱を持って伝えることが大事。
So when we talk about the history of journalism or share the history of journalism with students, we think it's really important to use that to share with people the potential that investigative journalism can have to to make changes in society. Like, for example, if we were talking about an example of investigative journalism overseas having a big impact, we might talk about the Pentagon Papers reporting in the US, which helped end the Vietnam War more quickly. An example in Japan would be, for example, one of Makoto's acquaintances went undercover in a mental hospital and reported on that experience. When he went undercover, he found that there was a lot of abuse happening in this hospital.
I think the journalist's name is Nellie Lee.
Yeah, so there was even physical abuse happening in this hospital. And then after he reported on this, the laws were changed in Japan to protect patients more so that this kind of abuse couldn't happen. So we think it's really important to show this kind of concrete example and give really clear case studies to journalism students. And like we talked about within the last question, to show them the concrete process of how the story was investigated and reported. And showing these concrete examples, the objective of sharing these concrete examples is to say to the students that you can do this too. Investigative journalism isn't something that only a select few people can do. Anyone can do it if they set their minds to it. Yeah, so that's the importance of learning from past examples and learning from history.
Yeah, thank you. I think that it is very much important for investigative journalists to know about the threats and problems of the way of doing investigative journalism. I'd like to know from you, how would you explain these things about the problems and threats? Yeah.
探査報道は、やっぱりお金もかかるし、時間もかかる。で、リスクもある。で、なかなかそういう意味でビジネスの採算が合わない。だから、いかに、ビジネスの採算に合わない中で、サステイナブルにしていくかっていうのが、大きな問題の一つ目。で、もう一つ目は、やっぱり一部の、例えば対権力者と、その取材をするジャーナリストというだけじゃなくて、いかに広く市民に自分たちのストーリーに共感してもらうか、探査報道に共感してもらおうか、ということが課題だと思います。どうしても、業界の、プロ同士の、レポートになってしまって、本当に、街の人、一般の、そんなに普段は、難しいことを考えてない人でも、そのストーリーを見て共感して、この問題は何とかしなくちゃいけないという怒りを持ってもらうというようなストーリーを、しっかり伝えていくっていうのが課題だと思います。
So there are two issues that we see with investigative journalism to start with. One is that investigative journalism, as you know, takes lots of time and money, and it also comes with a lot of risks. So because of these things, although investigative journalism is really important for society, it's not profitable from a business standpoint. So one of the challenges is how we can make investigative journalism sustainable so that we can support the reporters who do it. Yeah, because we all need to pay our rent and buy our dinner. And the second challenge we thought of, it's important to think about how to get the average reader, the average viewer, the average citizen to care about the stories that you're reporting on. So often investigative journalism tackles really difficult, complicated issues that maybe the average person doesn't know very much about, or maybe they've never thought how it impacts them, or never thought that they should care about these issues. But, and so it's a danger for investigative journalists who are so, I guess, deep in this world and are so deep in these issues. It can be easy for us to just want to explain maybe to other journalists or to other experts in these fields what we've discovered. But we need to remember who we're working for. We're working for the average citizen, right? So we need to craft our stories, to tell our stories in a way that everyone can relate to, and they can feel closer to the subjects of these stories. Yeah, and then not only relate and then feel close to, but then that'll help them help average citizens also want to change these unjust situations.
追加一つ言うと、そういう意味で、ヒントとして、ドイツのコレクティブという、同じノンプロフィットのインベスティゲーティブニュースルもあるけど、で、コレクティブに昔の3年前に見学に行ったことがあって、いろいろディスカッションしたんだけど、コレクティブが面白いのは、一回取材すると、それをもちろんネットのニュースにもするし、で、記事にもする。ドキュメンタリーで映像にもするし、あと漫画にもする。で漫画にして、で、それでより親しみを持ってもらう。で、共感してもらう。だから一つの取材結果をいろんな、ツールで届ける。だからこれは一つのヒントになる。
So one example of how to address the second issue we talked about, how to get the average citizen to feel a connection with and to care about the stories you're telling is a couple of years ago, Makoto went to go on, I guess, like a study tour to a investigative newsroom in Germany. And then an interesting thing that this newsroom in Germany, it's called Corrective. An interesting thing Corrective is doing is that they, I guess, package their story in multiple formats. Like, for example, they'll do an investigation, and then when they report on it, they'll, for example, post an article online, release a video, Then also they'll make a comic, like a comic book out of the story as well. And I think that sort of really fun format is a good way to get people more engaged with your work and get them engaged with the story. So we think that's a big hint, is to put your story in multiple different packages, because people react to different things. So if you give them lots of options, there's a greater chance that there'll be something that they can really relate to.
Thank you. In our country, Bangladesh, we also have some experience that our journalists who are known as investigative journalists, they are fighting many challenges. They are facing different threats. Sometimes state throw them to the jail. So it's not so easy for them to work for investigative journalism. So I think it is also important that every investigative journalist, they need protection from legal side, protection from institute. But what are you thinking about other ways to protect investigative journalists? Not only institutional protection, legal protection. What are the other ways we can try to find, or we can work on that? Yeah.
これは非常に大事なポイントで、一番大事なのは同じジャーナリスト同士の国際コラボレーション。で、これは、どんどんコラボが進んでいて、しかもインターネット時代ということで、なので、とにかくよその国のジャーナリストたちに助けてもらう。だから GIGN に行かれたかどうかちょっとわかんないんだけど、みんなで宣言出すんですよね。あれ集まって。みんなで守ろうと。で、例えば、マリア・レッサーの例は、何ですか？インタビューした。
Okay. So one, I guess, way that journalists can try and protect themselves amid our dangerous work is through international collaborations with other journalists and through forming international networks with other journalists. And I believe, I believe even the way our two organizations were introduced was through Stephen Butler, who works for the Committee to Protect Journalists. And the Committee to Protect Journalists, their organization's mission, as you can just tell from their name, is to make sure that journalists are safe. And I think recently, like, for example, they've been working to protect journalists who are still in Afghanistan after the Taliban has returned to power. So you can connect also with these organizations whose mission is to protect journalists. But then also, even in addition to these organizations, journalists work together to protect each other. And like, for example, I believe 2 years ago, when Makoto went to the the Global Investigative Journalism Conference, investigative journalists from all around the world were gathered together, and then they, for example, put out joint statements about the importance of investigative journalism and the need to protect journalists. For example, a little bit after that, I believe last year, maybe you're familiar with the situation of a journalist named Maria Ressa in the Philippines. Yeah, she's head of a newsroom called Rappler. But anyway, she's become a target of not only the president of the Philippines, but also a lot of online trolls and online attacks. And she's also been charged in a number of lawsuits that are attempts to silence her and her work. But journalists around the world have just raised their voices and said, this isn't right. An attack against one of us is an attack against all of us. So I guess using our platforms, since we all are part of media organizations, we already have a platform to share the stories of our fellow journalists and to bring attention to this issue of the need to protect journalists. So yeah, looking out for each other is one important thing we can do.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
I agree with you that unity and solidarity is the main power, I think, to protect ourselves,
Yes.
including the legal and institutional protection. I have last one question for you. In our country, and when we see the work of South Asian journalists work about investigative journalism, we usually see that they're struggling, they're facing lots of risks, and they're interested. The young journalists are also interested to do something with investigative journalism. But there are many obstacles from political situation and other power relation issues. So we think that for the development of investigative journalism, it is very important to focus on political issue and the issue of democracy. So how do you explain these things with your students? Yeah.
そうだな。
まあ、とにかく、こういう時はクロスボーダーで国際コラボをするしかなくて、それで、あと、それが基本で、いろいろ、拠点をも考えなくちゃいけなくて、で例えば、それこそ GIGN でアジアのメンバーとよく話になるのは、中国をどうやって取材するかっていうのをよく話し合ってるんですね。中国ではもう取材ができない。なかなかその政府が、から攻撃を受けるようなネタにテーマに関しては。だから、今ではもうちょっと香港ぐちゃぐちゃになったけど、あの時は香港を拠点にして、それで、中国の取材を試みようか。香港から中国に入ろうか。だからちょっと近い国で安全なところに拠点を置いて、そこに情報を集約するとか、そこを拠点に取材するとか、いうのも、よく話し合ってます。基本は国際コラボしかないと。
Yeah, I think our answer to this question is really similar to our answer to the previous question. We really think it's important to have these international collaborations and, to build networks between journalists in various countries because we can, I guess, each help out each other in our individual situations. Like one example of that might be when investigative journalists get together at international conferences. Often what the journalists working in Asia will talk about is how they can report on things happening in China. Because as you know, it's really difficult to report in China if the subject of your reporting is something that the Chinese government won't be happy with or doesn't want to be investigated or reported on. So one solution to this that journalists in Asia have done in the past is that they get as close as possible to the country. Like at the time, maybe the situation is a little different now, but at the time, journalists would base themselves out of Hong Kong and then report on China-related issues while living or doing their reporting from Hong Kong. So I guess you can increase proximity that way. Yeah.
これちょっと例を加えると、例えば軍事政権時代だった韓国とか、今の北朝鮮もそうだけど、世界中の記者は東京に拠点を置いて、東京から韓国に行ったり、北朝鮮に行ったりしてる。そういうちょっと近い国で情報を取るっていう拠点です。
Yeah, another similar example, I guess, again, from history is when South Korea was under a military dictatorship. Then journalists who were reporting on South Korea might be based out of Tokyo. And then they would only go into South Korea, I guess, for short business trips to report on things there. But to protect themselves, they would be based in a nearby country. Yeah. That's our answer. I think it's a really difficult question.
Thank you, both of you. I think this sharing and exchanging views will be helpful for our students, and I think we can work in future together. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you.
Yeah. Okay. See you. Thank you.
you.
Bye.